we can get started. So thank you very much, all of you, for joining us today. This information session is about, we are going to talk about all the immigration implications that you have as students overseas outside of Canada. Students should be delivered at Waterloo campus. And if you have any question related, you will get to know more about the immigration related questions in the future. You can contact me through email or attend my drop-in hours. Welcome. Crystal.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Crystal. I'm also the International Student Advisor. Welcome to this webinar. Hopefully you can get some important information from this. But right now, I'm working for part of Dome campus as well as Cambridge. So later, we can show our International Student Advisor's contact information, so you can know who is the International Student Advisor working for you.
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll do that at the end of this webinar. We will share all of our contact information. And during the webinar, I'm going to turn my video off just because the performance is better without the video. And then I'll be coming back once in a while during the webinar. Okay, so let's get started. Content of the webinar, what are we going to be talking about today? This webinar is based on the IRCC updates. IRCC is the Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada. It is the department inside of the Canadian government that you are going to be dealing with every time you want to come to Canada or you want to remain in Canada. Whether you want to come as a temporary resident or as a permanent resident, or even when you apply for your citizenship years on the road, the department you are going to be dealing with is IRCC, Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada. We refer to Immigration and Refugee Citizenship Canada always as IRCC. So every time you hear IRCC, that's what we are talking about. That's very important that you bear that in mind. You are dealing with the Canadian Embassy or the High Commission or the Visa Application Center in your home country, but the department that is behind all of this authorization to come to Canada is always IRCC. Okay, very important that you have that clear. The webinar is divided in 4 sections. It is a very, very heavy webinar. We are going to provide lots of information, and then to make it a little bit more light and easy for you to follow, we have divided the webinar in 4 sections. And after each section, I'm going to launch a quick quiz. A quiz that I launched for fun and for you to set some concepts and some ideas and to help you better understand. Of course, the quiz is not great and we don't even know what you answer. So please feel free to answer the questions and that will help you better understand the information that we are providing. And after the quiz, we are going to answer 2 questions related to the section. So please focus on the content of each section, what I'm going to be saying, because I'm sure you have questions already, but maybe these questions are covered during my presentation, and maybe during my presentation, there are new questions that arise, and there are other questions that you need to ask. So please hold your questions for now. Wait until the end of the section, and then while we do the quiz, we are going to give 2 or 2 minutes for you to ask the questions in the Q&A, and my colleagues, E and Crystal, will be screening these questions very quickly and selecting the most popular ones. So if you see that someone has already asked your question, you just need to click like, and that question will pop up, will go up, and then the chances to have that question answered will be higher. At the very end of the webinar, we'll have more time for questions and answers as well. Okay? So please bear that in mind and hold your questions, listen to the presentation and ask your questions at the end, because again, maybe the questions are already answered during the presentation. After we cover these 4 sections, the first one is about the process to come to Canada as an international student. The second one is about the implications of starting your studies from outside of Canada while your study permit application is in process. The third one is, if you have already the final approval, what do you need to do to come to Canada, to travel at this point? And the last one is about post-graduation work permit and the eligibility. We'll go in details in a minute. The last part of the presentation is about the resources that you have available as international students at Conestoga College, and we are going to finish with 10 or 12 minutes answering questions. Okay, so let's go with section number 1, that is the process to come to Canada as an international student. We are going to see the journey that international students have since the moment they apply for the study permit up until they become permanent residents. So we are going to see the whole overview and look at the temporary changes that are currently in place to face this pandemic. And then we'll go through some of the main documents that you need to be aware of. This is what this first section is going to cover. So let's say that we are in a pre-pandemic situation or in a regular situation, or we are over the pandemic and back to normal. This is the journey that normally students follow. So you look at that chart and it may seem a little bit complicated, but let's go step by step. The first step, you apply for a program in Conestoga. You have all done that already. And then you get your letter of acceptance. That's the first document that you get from the college. With that letter of acceptance, you submit your application, your study permit application. And then when the application is approved, in the meantime, maybe IRCC requests some documents, maybe there are some steps that you need to follow, but when the application is finally approved, you get your letter of introduction. The letter of introduction is the final approval in your study permit application. At that point, you are ready to come to Canada. Remember, we are in a regular situation pre-pandemic here. Then you travel to Canada by boat, car, or plane, most likely by plane, and then you will arrive at port of entry, most likely the airport. But if you come by land, you will arrive at the border. And then when you arrive at port of entry, when you arrive at the CBSA officer, that officer that we have in here, will do an examination of your documents. We'll look through all of your documents to come to Canada. And if everything is okay and is approved, we'll issue your study permit and COA work permit if your program has a work component. So this is very important. You don't get your study permit and COA work permit until you arrive at the airport or the border, until you arrive at port of entry. Until you are in the border to enter, you won't receive your study permit. What you received back home was your letter of introduction, the final approval, but you won't collect your study permit until you arrive in Canada, okay? So once you get your study permit at the airport and you leave the airport, then you can come to the college, enroll in the program and register, start your program. While you are in Canada as an international student, you need to comply with the study permit conditions. There are certain conditions that you need to respect, certain restrictions in the number of hours you can work when you are in Canada, and certain things that you need to comply with. We are not going to go in detail through all of these conditions, but we offer workshops and webinars that focus specifically in this area, the compliance with the study permit conditions while you are in Canada as a study permit holder. So I would recommend that you keep an eye in your Conestoga, that you keep monitoring your Conestoga email and the Conestoga webpage, and you look for further dates if you are interested in knowing more about the compliance with the study permit conditions. You study, you comply with the study permit conditions, and eventually you will graduate. When you graduate, if you meet all the requirements, you can apply for your post-graduation work permit. The post-graduation work permit is an open work permit that allows you to work anywhere in Canada in any occupation and allows you to gain a skill experience. So if you find a job in the NOC 0A or B, a job that is considered a skill, it allows you to gain some experience, and then you can use that experience to increase your score when you apply for your permanent residence through the express entry in the Canadian Experience class. We are not going to focus today on the permanent residence, but again, we have webinars dedicated to the permanent residents that are hosted by an IRCC outreach officer or someone from the provincial NOMI program. We'll talk about that at the end of this webinar. But as you can see, the process to come to Canada as an international student is a very straightforward process, but there are many steps. And everything you do from day one as an international student will affect your next steps. If you don't comply with the conditions of the study permit, you may not qualify for the post-graduation work permit. If you don't qualify for the post-graduation work permit and you don't get it, you don't have the chance to gain the skill experience. So everything is connected, and it's very important that from day one you comply with all the conditions. So now let's see what is the main difference during this pandemic. When you come to Canada as an international student, in a normal situation, you need to arrive in Canada in order to start your studies. However, when all this pandemic started, and first the borders were closed or there were very strong travel restrictions in place, everything stopped, as you remember 1 year ago, IRCC had to adapt to that situation and then created some temporary rules. And these temporary rules are basically that right now you don't need to be physically in Canada in order to start your program and make progress. As long as you submit a study permit application before the start date of your program, as long as you do that, you can register and start your program from overseas, and these studies will count for your post-graduation work permit in the future. So you can start and come to Canada once you get the letter of introduction, if you want to come, and then follow the same process that we explained before. This is the main temporary change during this pandemic, that right now it is possible for students to start from their home country even when they still have their application in process. We will see afterwards that this is from an immigration perspective. You also need to follow the registration policy from the college. Okay, so we'll see afterwards how we combine both. But if you look only strictly from the immigration perspective, the moment you submit your application for your study permit, you can register and start in your program, and these studies will already count for the post-graduation work permit. So nothing will change compared to the previous slide. And again, you need to make good progress and do as if you were in Canada. Okay, let's look first at the letter of acceptance. Now we are going to look a little bit through the documents that you need when you apply for the study permit. And let's start by the document you get from the college, the letter of acceptance. Some of you, most of you actually already know that letter, but maybe there are areas that can create a little bit of confusion. Let's start by the top. Obviously, your personal information, you need to check that is accurate and everything is correct. In the right, you have a designated learning institution number. This is the number that shows that Conestoga is a college that is authorized to register international students. So you will need to disclose that number basically every time you apply for something with IRCC. And then here in the program information section, I want you to pay attention on something. First of all, where it says campus, it tells you the campus you are in. even if you are starting your program remotely and right now things are online, you have one campus. The campus is the place where you would go if the classes were happening in the classroom, okay? So very important that you know which campus would be yours. In my example, the campus is Dun campus. And then program length. And here we are going to use a little bit of time. So when program length says, like in my example, 2 academic years, and then in brackets, periods of 8 months, what that means is that this program, this specific program, is a 2-year program. The academic length is 2 years, but the classes happen or is taught in 4 semesters. And the periods are 8 months. That means that is 8 months, schedule break, 8 months. So there is a break in the middle. Okay, so 8 months, schedule break, 8 months. If you calculate the amount of months in total, that would be 20 months, but the program is 2 years because the academic length is 2 years. Sometimes it says 2 academic years, periods of 16 months. That means that there is no break, that the period, the way is done, the program is 4 semesters on the road with no break in the middle. That's why it says 1 period of 16 months. But the academic length remains 2 years because the academic length of the program is 2 years. The time in the classroom is 16 months, but the academic length is 2 years. Okay, so when you apply for the post-graduation work permit in the future, the academic length is the one that should be considered by the officer. Final decisions are always at the officer discretion, so there are never guarantees with anything, but that's the way that it works and what our students normally get. The academic length is what the officer normally will look at, whatever length the college states the program is. Okay, very important. If you have 1 academic year periods of 8 months, it doesn't mean that the program is 8 months. It means the program is 1 year, but is taught in 8 months. Okay? And then underneath that, you have level of study. In my example, it says level 1. That means that the holder of this letter of acceptance is a new student, is starting from the beginning, the program. If the student, for whatever reason, was starting in an advanced level, because of a credit transfer or whatever, it will show exactly in which level the student was starting. Most of you, if not all of you, will have level 1 in your letter of acceptance. Okay, that's very important about the program information. So remember, the academic length is what determines the length of the program. This letter that I have here was issued on May 19, 2020, so it's an old letter. The one that you have received from the college must have here a little note in red that says underneath the estimated end date, underneath there, that states that the program is an on-campus program, but currently is delivered online because of the situation, but that's exceptional. You should have that note in the letter of acceptance. Okay, if you move in the right, you have a section that says internship, work practicum, and in my example, it says unpaid field placement required. What that means is that the program has a work component. Some programs at Conestoga College have co-op, some programs have optional co-op, some programs have field placements, and some programs have no work component at all. If you don't have work component at all, if it says here no, then you don't need to worry about applying for a co-op work permit. But the moment it says yes, whether it's a co-op, optional co-op, or field placement, you need to apply for a co-op work permit at the same time that you apply for the study permit. Okay, because you will need that co-op work permit to do the work that is required for you to graduate. So very important, check that site. And if it says yes, whatever the work component is, a co-op, optional co-op, or field placement, you need to apply for a co-op work permit at the same time. Okay, just underneath that, you have the information about the fees. Very important, don't let the deadlines pass. If you have any question, please ask either international admissions or international fees. And finally, in the bottom, conditions of acceptance, Sometimes the letters are not final, and you need to do some prerequisites before getting the final spot in the program. That's basically for students who need to complete the level 4 of English. Always check your letter of acceptance and make sure that if there is any condition, you will achieve such condition. Okay, so at one point in time, the offer is final. In the case, this is the front of your letter of acceptance, in the case that your program has a work component, field placement, co-op, what we mentioned before, in the case that's your situation, you will have a third page that is your co-op letter. That's the letter that you use to prove that your program has a work component and therefore you need a co-op work permit. If your program has no work component, you won't have that page. Okay, it looks like the one that is in my screen right now and shows the number of hours of work that are required to graduate, etc., etc. Okay, this is all for the letter of acceptance. Most of you have already applied for the study permit, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this right now, but very quickly, as you know, there are two ways that you can apply for your study permit. You can use the regular stream or the student direct stream that is offered in certain countries, not in all of the countries. If your country has this option, you may consider that because normally the processing is faster, although they require additional documents. So depending on the country you come from, you may have the option or not. If you have the option, look at the requirements and check whether that's something that interests you. Here are some of the most common documents listed, and I want to talk about the ones that are highlighted in yellow. Letter of acceptance, we already talked about that. We already went through that one. And the evidence of work requirement was the third page of the letter of acceptance in case your program has a work component. So we already talked about that. And let's focus now in the immigration medical exam. Some countries require a medical exam and some countries don't require a medical exam. So not all of you are required to provide a medical exam. When are you required to provide a medical exam? You are required to provide a medical exam in these two situations that are here in my little red square. If you have lived in a designated country for 6 months or more in the last year, that is, if you have lived in a country for 6 months or more that requires a medical exam, then you need to provide the medical exam. And if you have not been in a country, in a designated country, but you are coming to study in a program that requires some work in a designated area. What is a designated area? Is a work in a hospital with small children, with vulnerable people in general. So if you are coming to study a nursing program, for example, or early childhood education, personal support worker, health office practice, any kind of job, any kind of program that has a field placement or a co-op that will take place in one of these areas that are considered designated areas because they have some higher risk, you need to provide the immigration medical exam. If you have never lived in a designated country for 6 months or more in the last year, and if you are not attending a program that requires work in a designated area, then you don't need to provide the immigration medical exam. Now, this immigration medical exam has to be performed by an authorized, certified IRCC panel of physicians, and it's valid for 1 year. So, if you provide your immigration medical exam when you apply for the study permit, make sure before you travel to Canada that that medical exam is still valid. If the medical exam was taken more than 1 year ago, then that medical exam is expired and you need to take a new one. Okay? When you come to Canada, the immigration medical exam has to be up to date. Okay, and all the other documents, you can go through this, the proof of means of financial support, You probably all have gone through that already. Check also the explanation letter. Make sure that you explain well the roots in your home country, the reasons for your studies. Make sure that your application always makes sense. The burden of proof, when you apply for something with IRCC, the burden of proof is always on you. So make always sure that things are clear for the officer, that the officer will have no concerns or no doubts of the information that you are providing. The process to apply for a study permit, you probably know that already. If you don't, let's go very quickly through it. When you submit the application, the first thing that you need to do is create an IRCC online account. We have a video that we created explaining step by step how to create such account. We'll provide that link at the end of this presentation. Then you access in the IRCC portal. There is a bunch of questions that you need to answer. Based on the answers that you provide, you get a document checklist with the document that you need to provide. Once you upload all the documents, you can pay your fees and submit the application. And then while the application is in process, if there is an update that you want to provide or an additional document that you want to show, you can use the IRCC web form. Again, we provide the link at the end. Or if IRCC wants to request further information, they will do that through the IRCC online account. So make sure that you monitor regularly your IRCC online account, because if IRCC needs something from you, they will contact you through the IRCC online account, send you an email and ask you to go to the IRCC online account. Okay, so once you submit the application doesn't need to be static. If there are updates, you can always provide them through the IRCC web form, or if IRCC requires update, they will ask for them through the IRCC online account. Okay, bear that in mind, especially these days where the application process is being so long. It is important that you know that you can always update your file with IRCC. And then the third step would be the decision of the application. If the application is approved, if you get an approval and you come from a country that requires a visa to come to Canada, then you will receive a passport request letter. You will send your passport. Your passport will be stamped. A sticker will be put in the passport, and this is called temporary resident visa. And your letter of introduction. Remember at the beginning in our chart, we said the last step before coming to Canada as an international student is the letter of introduction, which is the last document that you need to come to Canada to study. If you come from a country that does not require a visa, most likely you require an ETA. The ETA is an electronic travel authorization that is linked electronically to the passport. So you won't be asked for the passport. You won't receive the passport request letter. The ETA will be automatically linked to the passport. You just will receive the letter of introduction. Okay. If you are not approved, if there is any issue with the application and you get a refusal, then you will receive a refusal letter, and the refusal letter will explain the grounds for refusal, the reasons why the application was refused. Okay, that's the port of entry. This is the last slide before our first, at the end of our first section. That's the port of entry letter of introduction. The official name is port of entry letter of introduction. Some people call it port of entry letter, some people call it letter of introduction letter, and some people sometimes even call it a final approval letter. But the official name is port of entry letter of introduction. That's the letter that you are going to receive when you get the final approval. Do not make any plan to come to Canada before you have such letter. And what you need to look at here is on the top left, you have all your personal details. Of course, once again, check that everything is correct. And the unique client identifier, this is a number that will be all of them. So when you arrive at the airport and you see the officer greeting you will greet you and then examine all your documents. And it's going to ask, for the documents related to the quarantine, give me the proof that you have reserved your hotel for 3 nights. Show me that you filled information about the quarantine plan. For that purpose, show me the ArriveCAN receipt, and that can be electronic or paper format. Show me that you got a COVID-19 laboratory test 72 hours before you travel and it was negative. So all of this is related to the temporary rules in place during pandemic. But then the officer will want to see your travel documents, a valid passport. You need to show a valid passport, a valid temporary resident visa or ETA, whatever is your, depending on your country of origin. So if your passport is from a country that requires a visa, you need to have a valid visa in your passport to enter Canada. This is the sticker. And this is especially important for students who were in Canada before and went back home and already hold a valid study permit. Please check that the visa is also valid, because the study permit on its own is not enough to enter Canada. You need to have a valid TRV or valid ETA to enter Canada. And most need one or the other. There are very, very few exceptions where none of them is required. Then you need to prove that you have your authorization to study in Canada. You need to prove that you are coming as an international student and you've been authorized to study in Canada. For this purpose, you can use the letter of introduction, that is your final approval, or your valid study permit. You only have a valid study permit, remember, if you were in Canada before as an international student. So if you are a returning student, you were in Canada, you got your study permit, you start your studies, and then you went back home, then you can have a study permit. But if you have never been in Canada as an international student before, what you have is the letter of introduction. Remember, you show the letter of introduction and the officer will issue the study permit and co-work permit on the spot. Okay, these are your immigration documents. So valid passport, TRV, and ETA are your travel documents. Letter of introduction or valid study permit are your immigration documents. And then once you have proved that you are allowed to travel to Canada, you have authorization to study in Canada, you need to prove that you are actually coming to study something in a DLI. And for this, you use your letter of acceptance if your program has not started yet, or your enrollment letter if your program already started. So if your program starts in May 1st, for example, or May 17, and you come on May 1st, the accurate letter is the letter of acceptance because the program has not yet started. But if you come on June 30, then the enrollment letter is the accurate letter because it's the letter that shows that the start date has already passed, but you register and you start your program and you are currently enrolled. That enrollment letter, I said that before, but I say that again, you can download the letter from your student portal under Service tab, Print a Letter. So you go to your student portal, you click the Service tab, print a letter, scroll down, you select Currently Enrolled Letter, and you click Generate, and then you have your enrollment letter. If you are traveling now for May, we are so close to the start date that you probably have already pre-registered or registered, and therefore you may be able to download your enrollment letter. I would recommend that you bring that letter too. So you bring the letter of acceptance, that is the most accurate one because the program has not started, but also the enrollment letter. Because some airlines are requesting the proof of the registration, the proof that you are already enrolled in the program. So bring the enrollment letter to show, look, I've done everything, I'm ready to go, even if the program has not yet started. This is something that could not happen in a regular situation, but right now, because you can register before you even arrive in Canada, some airlines are asking for the proof of enrollment to make sure that you are coming close to the start date of the program. This is why it's so important that you don't come too early. Okay? Then the valid immigration medical exam, if required. Remember, we spoke about it before. The valid immigration medical exam is not always required, but depending on the country you've lived in the last year and depending on the studies you are going to do and whether you have a work component in a designated area or not, you may require one. If you require one, you need to bring it with you and show it as part of your documents when you enter Canada. When you took the medical exam, the doctor gave you a paper that looks like the one that is in my screen. Most of the doctors use the e-medical system, so most likely will look like this one. If they don't use the e-medical, they will give you a form that is an immigration form, but I don't think any doctor very few doctors are using that, if any. Okay, so it will probably look like the one that I have in my screen. Please make sure that your medicals are valid. If you apply more than 1 year ago, there is a chance that your medicals are expired. If they are expired, you need to take new medicals before you come to Canada. Okay, you can check the visit date on the top right of the document. And if the visit date is more than 1 year ago, you need to retake your valid immigration medical exam. And then the CBSA officer will ask to show your proof of funds. They want to see that you are able to maintain yourself and pay for your expenses while you are in Canada. So you can show your GIC if you purchase one, savings accounts. You can basically use the same documents you use when you submit your application for the study permit, but make sure that these documents are up to date. So if when you apply for your study permit, you use a savings account, for example, you can use the same savings account, but with the statements from the last 3 months, not from 1 year ago. Okay, so make sure that you bring enough evidence to prove that you can pay for your expenses while you are in Canada. For the academic fees that you have already paid, you can use the tuition, the receipts, the tuition receipts that you have, that you receive when you pay. For the remaining fees and living expenses, any document that you use for your application should be okay, but again, up to date. It has to be fresh documents. They don't want to see documents from 1 year ago. And then any other document that you think can help you explain your situation. So let's say that you completed one level of your program and you are coming to Canada to continue with the second level. You can show your achievement report. If you were in Canada and you complete one program and then you went back home, you may want to show the completion letter. Or if you started your program in September, you are going to complete that now in May, and then you are going to travel in May for a second program. You may want to show the completion letter from the previous program and your achievement report. Anything that you think can help to explain your situation, you can bring to the airport. And a little piece of advice, always before you travel, check your documents in the IRCC online account to make sure that there have been no changes. It's very unlikely, but it's always good to double check. When you arrive in Canada, when you arrive at the airport, the officer will examine the documents we went through in the slide before and will issue your immigration documents, study permit and co-work permit. Then you will head to your 3 nights in the approved hotel. And then after these 3 nights, if the test that you got at the airport comes back negative, you will head to the place where you are going to quarantine for another 14 days. On the day 10, you need to take another test with a home test kit that they provide at the airport. And on day 14, another test in a test center. If all of these tests are negative, then you are free to go. Again, I'm not the specialist in the quarantine plan and the follow-up with all these tests. You need to check that with our International Transition Coordination team, and you should attend the webinar that is hosted every Thursday at 7 o'clock in the morning. And let's go to the last part. When at the airport, when the officer has already examined all your documents, will issue the study permit and co-work permit. Please make sure that you provide a copy to the college so we know that you are in Canada, and we put the details. We update your file with the details of your study permit and co-work permit. Very important, the moment you step in Canada as an international student holding a study permit, you need to comply with the conditions. Respect the number of hours you are allowed to work, remain registered in the program and making good progress, etc., etc. Again, I'm not going to go into the details, but bear that in mind. And again, we offer information sessions and webinars that are related to these topics. This is what the study permit looks like. That's the study permit that the officer is going to issue at the airport. Very quickly, what you need to look at, and if there is any mistake, and you can bring that mistake on the spot to the officer, and you may be able to fix the mistake on the spot, so you don't need to fix that later. So when the officer gives you the study permit, on the top you will have a number starting by the letter F. This is the document number, the UCI that will match the UCI that you have in your letter of introduction. It's your client identifier. Expiry date, check the expiry date. And if there is any mistake, let the CBSA officer know. I've seen in the past, sometimes the officers make a mistake, maybe typing the year, and they put a year or a date that is about to expire like tomorrow. There is clearly a mistake, so you may want to bring that to the attention of the officer. And under conditions, check the specific conditions. If when you arrive in Canada, you are thinking about working as an international student, it is very important that you have this condition printed. May accept employment on or off campus if meeting eligibility criteria as per Regulation 186, and must is working if no longer meeting this criteria, blah, blah, blah. So you need to have that condition printed. If you are an English student, you are not allowed to work off campus, so the condition that you may have is may accept employment on campus, only on campus, because you are only allowed to work on campus. Even if they put off campus, you are still not allowed to work off campus because you are an English student. But if you want to work, if you are in an academic program and you want to work on and off campus and they forget to put that condition, you may bring that to the attention of the officer. I'm not sure we are going to correct that on the spot. Again, this is up to the officer, but you can try, okay? If they don't put the condition and you don't notice, or they don't want to change it or anything, contact us at your arrival in Canada, because you are going to need to apply for an amendment of your study permit or maybe a new study permit, depending on your situation, okay? We'll look through that and advise what is more convenient for you. But this is how the study permit looks like. In the bottom of the study permit, it says, this does not authorize re-entry. That means that this is not a travel document, is what I said before. When you come to Canada, you still need to have your travel documents, passport and PRV or ETA. The study permit itself is not a travel document. It's a document that gives you status in Canada, that's all. And that's the co-work permit. So for the co-work permit, on the top, the number starts by the letter U. The UCI number will be the same that you have in your study permit. Here, where it says employer, make sure that it says Conestoga College or DLI or nothing, but it doesn't mention another institution, that there is no mistake with that. They don't show the name of another college, because if they show the name of another institution, this co-work permit won't be valid. And then check the conditions. Very important for students who are in the health field or working with children, students with who provide the medical exam, make sure that it doesn't say here that you are not allowed to work in the health field. Because if that's the case, you need to tell them, look, here is my medical exam and it's the right exam, so please remove that condition. Because otherwise you will need to apply for a new co-work permit. Because if they don't allow you to, if the co-work permit does not allow you to work in a hospital, for example, you cannot do your your field placement. So make sure that there is nothing strange under conditions and remarks. That remark that says underneath here basically says that this is a work permit for co-op or field placements and cannot be used anywhere else. So the co-op work permit, you cannot use the co-op work permit to work in any job but the hours that are related to your program and required to graduate. Finally, very quickly, if you come with your family members, make sure that they all have their approvals, they all have their own documents, and they all can prove that their travel is essential during this pandemic. And if you travel at the same time, there is no necessity for them to have a writing authorization from IRCC, but if they travel at a later date, they will need an authorization from IRCC. Okay, let me launch one more question here. We are at the end of our section 3. And then the question is, when do I get the hard copy of my study permit and co-op work permit? At port of entry, airport or the border after examination of my documents, or at the time I receive my passport and stamp or my ETA is issued? I can see that one. People doing amazingly well. And again, you can pose your questions in the Q&A section. Okay, I'm going to end the polling now, share the results. And 90% of you said at port of entry after examination of my documents, and this is absolutely correct. When you receive the passport, what you receive is the letter of introduction, which is the final approval, and the letter that you show at the border, and then you get the study permit and co-op work permit at the border. Awesome. That was great. Let's go to the stop sharing now, and then any questions?
Yeah, there's one question about the travel support letter. How can I get a travel support letter?
There is no need for a travel support letter because before October 2020, it was required that the students prove that they were traveling because of an essential reason. And for that purpose, the travel support letters could help. But after October 2020, this rule changed. And for a student to be considered to be traveling because of an essential reason, that the student must hold all the documents, have the quarantine plan, and be attending a DLI that has a COVID readiness plan approved by the provincial government. Conestoga has been approved by the Ontario government and is in the list of approved DLIs. So because you are coming to study in Conestoga, you are considered to be traveling because of an essential reason, and you don't need to have a travel support letter.
Okay, there are many questions still focused on, can I change campus? How can I do the registration? Or how can I defer of the programs? All those questions are not really related to admission teams. So we are not able to answer those questions. But again, I think I still mention that because of the message from biometrics, some students were confused whether they can use biometrics to do the registration.
Okay, but is there any question related to coming to Canada, arriving in Canada? Do you have any questions?
Not really. The whole letter is one. It's a
There's
lot.
some question about the timing of travel. For example,
the timing of travel, I recommend that you come 2 weeks with time to complete your quarantine and then the start of the program, or after the program has started. Because it is very important that you come to attend a DLI that has a COVID readiness plan approved by the provincial government. If you come too early, the officer may think you are not coming to attend a DLI because your program doesn't start until late. 2 weeks, I would say, would be the ideal. 3 weeks, so you have time to complete the quarantine. If you come 4 weeks before, you can still say, I have to complete 3 days in the hotel, and then at least 14 days before I'm out of my quarantine. And I want sometimes before the program starts, I want sometimes to find out about the area where I live, where to buy groceries, to get adapted. So that can be convincing. I wouldn't come more than 4 weeks before the start date of the program. There is no specific date. There is no specific rule for this. Close to the start date or after. It's better, I think, that you come when the program has already started than coming too early before that.
Yeah, if you travel after the program starts, that is only when your program is delivered remote, right? And at the airport, you can show, you can explain to the officer, oh, I can do the quarantine at the same time studying online. You can maybe show the college website, the academic delivery plan. I can do the quarantine at the same time. Yeah, because my program
what Crystal said is a very good point, and I forgot to mention that in my presentation. If you arrive once the program has already started, you can tell the officer, I'm not missing any classes because my classes are all online. So I'll be doing my quarantine and doing my classes online. So yes, this is a very, very good point if you come after the program has started. Yeah, no specific date on when to come, but the closest you can to the start date, the best. Any more questions about this?
I think that is for this part.
Section.
You can leave more questions maybe at the end.
Okay, so let me see. Let me know if you don't see the screen completely. Do you see that okay now?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, I don't know what happened before. Okay, so we are almost there in the fourth section. We are going to talk very quickly about the post-graduation work permit eligibility. Again, the post-graduation work permit is an open work permit that allows you to gain some skill experience while after you complete your program, and this skill experience can be used when you apply for your PR through the X% Canadian Experience class stream. Okay, so that this experience helps you improve your CRS, your score. There are some regular requirements that have not changed, and I'm going to go very, very quickly through them. The first one is that you can only apply for the post-graduation work permit once in your lifetime. So that's why I think if you complete one program overseas and you decide to apply for the post-graduation work permit straight away from overseas, you should talk with an international student advisor, because that will be your only chance to have a post-graduation work permit. And if you cannot travel immediately, you can not get good use of the time of your post-graduation work permit. You must have graduated from an eligible program, so that means that you cannot apply for a post-graduation work permit until you are a postgraduate. The name says it all. Apply within 180 days after your graduation. Have held a valid study permit during that time. Again, if you think that you are going to complete your program overseas and you want to apply for the post-graduation work permit from overseas, then speak with an ISA, because you really don't meet that requirement, but during pandemic, it is open to the final approval. It's not necessary to have the valid study permit. But again, there can be other issues if you go for this option, so very important that you discuss with an international student advisor. If you are in Canada, you must hold legal status. And very important, and that's why this one is highlighted here, have maintained full-time status during each semester. Whether you are outside of Canada or inside of Canada, the day you start your program, please make studies your priority. Make sure that you remain registered as a full-time student during each semester of the program. Make sure that you don't fail subjects that force you to go part-time in the middle of the program. Because one of the requirements, and it's a very important requirement that you need to meet when you apply for the post-graduation work permit, is that all your semesters were full-time. You were full-time registered in each of the semesters of the program. There are a few exceptions that are the last semester that can be part-time. The last semester, if you have like 1 or 2 subjects that you need to clear, you don't need a full workload to complete the program, you have remained full-time for the whole program, and it's just the last one that you are part-time, then that part-time will be considered full-time. That one doesn't affect your eligibility for post-graduation work permit. If you need to take an authorized leave in the middle of the program because of a family emergency, because of an academic issue, whatever that is justified and authorized by the college, that can be considered an exception. And then students who took part-time studies during the summer 2020, last year, due to COVID. Obviously, you are not in that third group. So unless you have a medical reason and you need to take a leave, or unless it is the last semester, having part-time studies in the middle of the program can be problematic when you apply for the post-graduation work permit. So make sure that whether you start your program from overseas or inside of Canada, you are ready to give priority to your studies. And then those are the changes during this COVID situation. So in a pre-pandemic situation, any out-of-country studies are excluded from the post-graduation work permit length. Any studies you do outside of Canada are deducted, and at least 50% of the program has to be done in Canada and in person. So if, for example, you are in a 2-year program and you do 2 semesters from outside of Canada, these 2 semesters would be deducted from the post-graduation work permit, and the other 2 will be counted as long as they represented the 50% in Canada and in person. So in other words, in a pre-pandemic situation, you have to do your studies in Canada. There is no way to register and study from outside of Canada. However, during this COVID situation, the studies are not excluded from the post-graduation work permit. So any studies that were taken from March 2020, March last year, up until December 31st, 2021, these studies will not exclude from the post-graduation work permit length, and you can complete up to 100% of the program outside of Canada. There is no required percentage in Canada as long as you complete the studies before December 31st, 2021. Okay, so if you start a program in May and you complete the program back home, a 1-year program in December, you do the whole program outside of Canada, that's perfectly fine. It still qualifies for post-graduation work permit. Now, to benefit from these temporary rules, if you study outside of Canada, you must have a study permit. Again, that's because you were a student before here in Canada and then you went back home. Letter of introduction, you have the final approval and you decide, you know what, I don't want to go through all the requirements of the quarantine. I'm going to hold my trip to Canada and stay back home and start my studies with my letter of introduction. That's perfectly fine. Or if you can prove that you submit an application for a study permit prior to the start of the program. Eventually, that application has to be approved. So remember, when you start your program, while your application is still in process, you will only have these studies considered for post-graduation work permit if eventually your study permit application is approved. Remember, if you get a refusal, but if you apply for a second time and before the end of the program and eventually you get an approval, then all the studies will count for post-graduation work permit. This is very important because this is a change from March 10. Before, after a refusal, every studies were discounted from the post-graduation work permit. Right now, it's not like this. If eventually you get an approval, all the studies will be considered for your post-graduation work permit. Okay? very important, you were enrolled in a post-graduation work permit eligible program that was in progress in March 2020. It's not your case because you are all new students, and you will begin either in the spring or the fall. The deadline of this temporary rule, once again, is December 31st, 2021. So this is really open for students in the spring and fall 2021. Okay, this is the length of the post-graduation work permit. If you complete a program that is 8 months or less than 2 years, the length will be similar to the length of the program, will match the length of the program. If the program is 2 years or longer, or you complete more than one program and the combined length is 2 years or more, then the post-graduation work permit length should be for 3 years. The maximum of a post-graduation work permit is the maximum length is 3 years. The minimum length is 8 months. Again, remember, we talk about that when we look at our letter of acceptance. The length of the program is the academic length. A 1-year program that is done in 2 semesters, 8 months, the academic length is 1 year. So the post-graduation work permit should be issued for 1 year. Okay? Final decision always at the discretion of the officer, but IRCC normally goes with what the college states in the completion letter. And if the completion letter, acceptance letter states academic length 1 year, the program is considered to be 1 year length, regardless of the time that you are in the class. Okay, this is very important to remember. Okay, our last question. Go here. There we go. If you are currently enrolled in a 2-year program that is taught in 4 semesters, so the program can be completed in 4 semesters, 16 months, with no scheduled break, how long should your post-graduation work permit be? 3 years or 16 months? And then you can ask your questions related to the post-graduation work permit, and E and Crystal will be gathering them. Okay, I will end the polling now. 90% of you said 3 years, and this is totally correct. If you are currently enrolled in a 2-year program that can be completed in 4 semesters, but the program is a 2-year program, you are eligible for 3 years post-graduation work permit, because after 2 years of studies, 2 or more, the length should be 3 years. It's only according to the length of the program when it's less than 2 years. Okay, 16 months because there is no scheduled break. If there was a scheduled break, it would be 20 months. Doesn't matter. What it matters is the academic length, and the academic length is 2 years. Okay, so I think that's very clear now. And before we go to the very last part of the presentation, let me answer a couple of more questions.
So let me ask you one question, Alicia. If I combine 2 programs, 2 1-year programs, will I get 3-year work permit, post-graduation work permit,
if both
or not?
If both programs meet the requirements for post-graduation work permit, and each program is at least 1 year length, so the combined length is 2 years, academic length, then the answer is yes, you qualify for post-graduation work permit of 3 years. If the combined length is less than 2 years, or one of the programs don't meet the requirements, then no. Both programs have to meet the requirements for post-graduation work permit eligibility, and the combined length between both programs has to be 2 years or more.
Yeah, there's another question. I think the student is confused about for co-op work permit and PGWP. The question is, can I apply for PGWP at the end of my program, even if the program doesn't have a co-op or placement from the start?
Okay, so yes, there is a confusion there.
Yeah.
Some programs are only have classes in the classrooms, traditional classes. Some programs have a work component, like a field placement, an internship, a co-op, and they have some kind of work component that is required for the person to graduate. To do this work that is part of the studies, that is work that is like one more subject, you need the co-op work permit. And that co-op work permit is only to do these hours, so you cannot use that co-op work permit anywhere else. The post-graduation work permit is a work permit that you can apply after you graduate. As long as the program you graduate from is eligible for post-graduation work permit, it doesn't matter whether your program had a co-op or internship or not. The program, you complete a program that is a 2-year program, you are eligible for post-graduation work permit of 3 years. You complete a program that is 1 year, you are eligible for a 1-year post-graduation work permit, regardless of the content of the program. The program is either eligible or not eligible. Our Conestoga programs are eligible for post-graduation work permit. The important thing, the main thing is that you meet the requirements and you remain registered full-time. That's the main thing. That you don't have part-time semesters in the middle of the program. That's what will jeopardize your chances to get the post-graduation work permit. And if you don't get the post-graduation work permit, you cannot gain the skill experience. Without the skill experience, you don't increase your score for this pre-entry. So that's why it's so important that you give priority to your studies and you are very serious about that.
One more question. When should I apply for the post-graduation work permit? In the middle of the program?
After graduating from the program. It's a post-graduation work permit. The first requirement is that you apply after you graduate. You must have graduated from an eligible program in order to be able to apply for the post-graduation work permit. If you apply before you don't meet the requirement, you will have a rejection.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to the very last part and then we can allocate some time for Q&A. So,
maybe we don't have that many time, maybe 1 or 2 questions, 1 or 2 more questions to end the whole session.
You see the screen now? You see
the whole screen.
Okay, so here is a slide. I just wanted to dedicate the last couple of minutes of this presentation because we moved to the Q&A to show the resources that you have from an immigration perspective to help you with your immigration status. There are 4 international student advisors at Conestoga College. We all have the designation to advise our students. We are either regulated Canadian immigration consultants, RCICs, or RICIAs, Regulated International Student Immigration Advisors. We have the designation and we can help you with all your questions related to immigration, your immigration status, and the one of your family members. Even if you have an agent or an immigration consultant that is helping you, or even then, you may want to come to us to ask the questions that you may have so we can clarify your doubts. You have an international student advisor assigned to your program. So in the next slide, I'm going to share how we are divided by programs, but we all offer drop-in hours, so you can attend our drop-in hours. Maybe some of you have already done that. We also can schedule one-to-one meetings, so we can go through something that maybe you don't want to discuss in a group in the drop-in hours. You prefer to discuss in person, so we can schedule a one-to-one meeting, and we can also be contacted by email. When all this pandemic is over, we can be met in person. We meet with our students one-to-one in person in our office. Right now, our meetings have to be in Zoom, but when we are back in the office, we will reopen the option to meet with our students physically in the office. We offer webinars like this one very regularly in different topics, in different immigration topics. These are information sessions like the one of today, or workshops. The workshops are more technical and are mostly addressed to students who need to prepare an application, or more of these technical issues about how to prepare documents, etc., etc. We also organize information sessions that are hosted by guest speakers. If you are interested in knowing more about your pathways to permanent residence, you may want to attend one of these information sessions. Sometimes it's the officer from the IRCC that comes, or from the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. Very soon, on the 20th, there is an information session hosted by the OINP, the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. So keep an eye in your Conestoga email. If you are registered as an international student, you may receive an invitation. But we do that very regularly. So if you don't receive the invitation for this time, don't worry, because you will receive for the next one. If you are interested in knowing your work eligibility as an international student, you can use our work eligibility self-assessment tool that you can download, that you can check in our webpage. It's a tool that the ISAS we have created is specifically for our students in Conestoga. It's a tool that, by answering yes or not, gives you, according to your situation, what is your eligibility to work and how many hours, etc., etc. And then we also provide a FAQ in our webpage with the most frequent questions that the students have. You can check all this information in our international webpage under visa permits or under workshops. Here is the two links. This is how we are organized. So I recommend that you take a screenshot of this slide, or you take a picture, or whatever is the easiest for you, so you know who your international student advisor is. Please make sure that you attend the drop-in hours, or you address your queries to your international student advisor. If you address them to the wrong advisor, it's going to take longer for you to have an answer. As you can see, we are divided by campus. And in the case of DUN, that is a very big campus, there is another division by school. So if you are in DUN campus, check what is the school of your program, and depending on the school, it will be me or Crystal. Okay? For the others, it's just by campus. You remember, in the letter of acceptance, you can check which campus you are in. These are two slides with useful updates of everything we talk about today, how to create an online account. This is a video that we created for our students as well, how to check whether you need a visa or an ETA, what to expect from the immigration medical exam. Many useful links. You will receive this presentation. The PowerPoint, you're going to receive that, so you can check all these links if you need the information. Okay, so one more quiz, and I promise is the last one. I made you work quite a lot today. Is what kind of questions can the ISAS help you with? Immigration related questions such as eligibility to work, study permit extension applications, TRV applications, etc. Sorry, I don't think I launched the polling now. What kind of questions can the ISAS help you with? Immigration-related questions such as eligibility to work, study permit extension applications, TRV applications, etc. Refunds and fees of the program, registration in the program, or academic issues. And that's very important, because sometimes you send a request and you are waiting for a long time for a response, and when you get the response is used to refer you somewhere else. So it is very important that you know who does what. I'm going to leave some time here. I see people are voting. You've been a really good audience today, very focused. Okay, so almost 90% of the people have already voted. So I'm going to end the polling, share the results, and this is completely right. We can help you with anything that is immigration related. If you have questions regarding refunds and fees of the program, you need to contact international admissions or international fees. Better international fees. About registration in the program is international admissions. So for the question before about can I register with my biometric instruction letter, you need to go to the international admissions team. That's where you need to go. We, the ISAs, we will provide you the information if we know it, but we don't have the most updated information regarding to this, and this is not our area. So please go to international admissions, and if you know the admission officer for your program, go directly to the admission officer. And for the academic issues, if you have problems with your subject, if you are struggling with something, if you are not sure about what electives to take, if you have problems with a grade, anything that is academic related, you need to speak with either your program coordinator or your student success advisor. The international student advisors cannot help you with that. We are international student immigration advisors, okay? We can help you. Once you have your academic, for example, you speak with your program coordinator and the program coordinator gives you options, academic options that will affect your status in Canada as a full-time student, then you can come to us and we can look and assess your situation and check and assess and advise on what the best options are for you in order to maintain your immigration status as an international student. But academic topics itself, if you're struggling with a subject, if you don't know what elective to take, all these things you need to discuss with your program coordinator. Okay? Good. Thank you very much. And then we are going to dedicate, let me close here. Stop sharing. Is 10:36. Let's dedicate 5 more minutes to answer some of the questions that may still be in the Q&A. And then we'll close the webinar. Okay? I'm ready.
Okay, let me start, Alicia. So after I arrive in Canada, at the port of entry, I get my study permit, and then I found something wrong on the study permit with the conditions, and I also found the study permit cannot cover the full length of my program. Who should I contact? Can I contact you? Can I contact Crystal, or should I contact admission officer?
Okay. If at the airport you realize that there is something with your study permit, my first advice would be to ask the CBSA officer if they can correct that. And if you are lucky and they correct that, perfect. If this is not an option because you have already left the line when you realize that your study permit has a mistake, or the officer says, look, I cannot do that right now, you need to fix that once you are in Canada, then you need to check the chart with the international student advisors and address that question to your international student advisor. Remember, we are divided by campus, and DON also is divided by schools. So you check, I can share the chart again one more time afterwards. You check who your international advisor is, and then you explain your concern. Maybe the mistake that you think is a big mistake is not such a mistake. Maybe it's not such a problem. Maybe you have the right to apply for an amendment, or maybe you should just apply for a new study permit. The study permit is not long enough to cover your program while you're in Canada, then you need to apply for an extension before the expiry date. Okay,
so, explain a little bit, clarify, how can I know the conditions on the study permit is correct, or what should I notice? What should I look at?
You need to look at, let me check.
Sorry, this is a question I guess some of the students are.
Oh, that's a very fair question. So this is your, here is the study permit. So here is your study permit. So that's what you need to look at. So first you check your client, the client information are your personal details. Let's say there is a mistake in your date of birth. Then you tell the officer, look, there is a mistake in my date of birth. And then the officer says, I cannot correct that now. Then come to see an ISA, and then we'll see what we do with that mistake. Nobody better than you will be able to check that. Then in the additional information, you can check the expiry date, and if it is too short, like they give you like 3 days because there is clearly a mistake, the officer made a mistake with the year or something like that, you can point that too. If the officer doesn't change that, then probably the best for you is that you apply for an extension of the study permit straight away. And then under conditions and remarks, there are certain conditions that are standard, like the first one that says must leave Canada by the expiry date of your study permit. This is a very standard condition. Or the one that doesn't let you work, is not valid for employment in unauthorized jobs, like the sex trade or work in strip clubs. All of these jobs that are not authorized, the study permit obviously doesn't allow you to work in this kind of job. Those are standard conditions. Another condition that you need to check is whether you have the option that allows you to work as an international student. If the officer has forgotten to put that option, that condition, you won't be able to work in Canada until you fix that. You need to speak with your international student advisor. If that condition that I have highlighted in blue is missing from your study permit. If that condition is missing, you need to make sure that you speak with an international student advisor, because you won't be able to have your SIN number, you won't be able to work in Canada until you have that fixed. And then if you see something strange under conditions, if you see something that you don't understand, just come to ANAISA and we will explain that to you. Because maybe it's something standard, or maybe it's something that they put in your condition and in your study permit and they shouldn't have. Okay? So always come to an international student advisor if you have questions when you look at your document. This is what a standard right document will look like. Okay? So if you think something different, come to an international student advisor and we will take a look.
Or sometimes under their remarks, so there's no condition at all, it's blank. So for that must be something wrong with the study permit's conditions.
Anything that you think is not what you were expecting, you can discuss with us. Any more questions?
Yeah, I think time is running out. Do you want to answer the last question? One student said, "Oh, my program is a 1-year program. I want to take a second program after this. How can I extend the study permit? Do I need an acceptance letter for this? What's the procedure?"
Okay. Is the student, I assume the student is still outside of Canada, or?
Yeah. For example, starting the first program in May, and then the plan is to take a second program after this.
You start the first program in May, and then you have already your letter of introduction. The first thing you need to check is when is the latest that you can enter Canada with that letter of introduction. And make sure that you come to Canada before the expiry date. But also that when you come to Canada, you have a program to follow. So let's say that your letter of introduction expires in March 2022, for example, and your current program ends in December 31st. And you want to start a second program in May 2022, I would recommend that you come to Canada before the end of your current program, because otherwise in January it's going to be tricky for you to come before the letter of introduction expiry date, because your program doesn't start until May. It's too late. So come before the end date of the current program. Get the study permit up until March, likely, because most likely you will get a study permit that lasts the same than your letter of introduction. And then once in Canada, when you have acceptance in the second program, then you can apply for an extension of the study permit. This is one scenario. If you have your application in process, when you complete the program is still in process and you are going to start another program, then you should update your file with the new letter of acceptance through the IRCC web form and keep waiting until you have your application processed. To make it a more generic question, if you want to continue with a second program, you need acceptance in the second program. You always need a valid study permit if you are in Canada to complete your first program first, and then you can apply for the extension for the. And if you are overseas, always make sure that you come to Canada before the expiry date of your letter of introduction, and always on a time that you can prove that you are coming to study something.
Yeah, I think that is all. That is all for the.
We do have a lot of questions, but it's almost impossible for us to answer them all. So if students have
you targeted any question that has not been covered in the webinar? Anything that is pending that has not been covered with the webinar, or is all over through the same idea?
Yeah. Okay.
No, I'm asking if you have any question in your. You get any question that has not been answered during the webinar?
No, I think most of the questions related to our today's webinar we have already touched from different angles. But to some specific questions, I have already answered some of the questions, like to contact a student advisor or give some directions. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's okay for today.
Okay, let me answer one that I just saw in the chat about the online classes and the points for the PR. I have that question here. Will online classes points will consider in CRS points? Let me answer that one, and then we can close that. This question has no final answer yet. I cannot give you a final answer because there are conversations in place. As it is right now, you would get points for your highest level of education, but you would not get points when you study overseas. You won't get the points, the bonus points for being physically in Canada, for completing studies being physically in Canada. However, we are waiting for updates from IRCC because that has been flagged as an issue, and we know they are working on it. So we expect to have some updates soon. But as it is right now, you would need to be physically in Canada and complete at least 8 months in the class or online, but physically in Canada in order to get the 15 bonus point or 30 bonus points, depending on the length of your program. Okay? I just wanted, because this is a very common question, and it was strange that didn't show up before. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Crystal and Eve, for helping us with the questions. I hope that was useful for you. I hope that gave you, provide you some information that will help you take your decisions. Welcome to Conestoga, and we hope to see you very soon on campus. And good luck with your studies. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.
Bye.